The rain came down in heavy sheets over the graywood forest. Thunder rolled across the dark sky, and the trees bent low under the wind. A single lantern moved between the trunks, swinging in the hand of a tired man. His name was Daniel Hart. He was a herbalist from the small village of Hollowbrook, and he was looking for moonroot. Moonroot only grew after a heavy storm, and it only stayed fresh for one night. So Daniel walked through the mud with his boots soaked and his cloak heavy, hopping to find enough to last him through winter. He had almost given up when he heard the sound. It was low, broken, like something large and hurt was trying to breathe. Daniel froze. He lifted his lantern higher. The sound came again, this time closer. It came from a deep hollow behind a row of old pine trees. Most men would have run. Daniel was not most men. He was a healer, and a healer follows pain, not runs from it. He stepped slowly through the wet grass. His heart was beating fast. The smell of blood reached him before he saw anything. Then his lantern light fell into the hollow, and Daniel stopped breathing. There, lying on the cold earth, was a dragon. She was huge. Her scales were black like polished coal, and her eyes shined with a soft golden light. 3 long spears were stuck deep into her side. Blood pooled around her body. Her wings, once strong, lay broken and torn. Daniel knew what she was. Every child in the kingdom knew. A black dragon, the forbidden kind. The kind that knights hunted, the kind that priests cursed. But Daniel did not see a monster. He saw a mother dying. She turned her head when she saw him. He thought she would breathe fire. He thought she would attack. Instead, her golden eyes filled with something soft, something almost human. She lowered her head and pushed her snout gently toward something near her belly. 3 small eggs, each one black with thin silver lines, each one glowing faintly in the dark. Daniel understood without words. She was asking him, begging him, the last thing a dying mother could do for her children. He knelt beside her. His hands shook. "I am sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry." The dragoness blinked slowly. A single tear slid down her scaled cheek. Then her chest stopped moving and her golden eyes went dim. Daniel sat in the rain for a long time. He did not know how long. He just looked at her body and at the 3 eggs glowing softly between her claws. He could leave. He could pretend he had never seen this. He could go home, dry his boots, and forget. But the eggs were still warm. Slowly Daniel pulled off his cloak. He wrapped the 3 eggs inside it, one by one, like a father wrapping newborn bobbies. They were heavier than he expected and warm against his chest. He whispered a quiet thank you to the dead mother. He promised her something he was not sure he could keep. Then he walked home through the storm, carrying the most dangerous secret in the kingdom in his arms. His cottage stood alone at the edge of Hollowbrook. It was small, with a low roof and a stone chimney. Bundles of dry herbs hung from the wooden beams. A small cat named Pepper slept by the fire. Pepper opened one eye when Daniel came in, sniffed the air, and ran under the bed. Daniel did not blame her. He placed the 3 eggs near the hearth on a bed of soft straw. He stirred the fire until the flames danced high. Then he sat down on his small wooden stool and waited. He did not know what else to do. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, just before midnight, the first egg cracked. A small black snout pushed out. 2 amber eyes opened and blinked at the firelight. The little dragon was no bigger than a kitten. It shook off the bits of shell and looked around the room. Then it looked at Daniel. Daniel did not move. He barely breathed. The hatchling waddled forward on tiny legs and climbed straight into his lap. It curled up against his belly and let out a soft, happy chirp. The second egg cracked 5 minutes later. This one had silver tips on its wings, smaller than the first, more careful. It climbed onto Daniel's shoulder and tucked its head under his beard. The third egg cracked just before dawn. This one was bigger, bolder. Its scales were a deep cobalt blue under the black. It marched right up to Daniel, looked him in the eye for a long moment, then climbed up his arm and sat on top of his head like a small, angry crown. Daniel laughed for the first time that night, a soft, shaky laugh. "Hello, little ones," he whispered. He named them as the sun came up. The one in his lap with curious amber eyes he called Cinder. The small, careful one with silver wings he called Onyx. The bold one on his head he called Storm. By morning, all three were asleep against his chest. Their tiny hearts beat fast and warm. Daniel sat very still by the dying fire. He looked down at the three hatchlings. He looked at the door. He looked at the small window where the first light of dawn was creeping in. He understood what he had done. In every village from the mountains to the sea, hiding a single black dragon was a crime worth death. He was hiding three. But when little Cinder sighed in her sleep and pushed her snout closer to his heart, Daniel knew one simple thing. He was not going to give them up, not for any king, not for any law, not for anything in this world. 3 weeks passed in the small cottage at the edge of Hollowbrook. Inside those walls, a quiet little world had grown, a world made of warm milk, soft straw, and the sound of tiny claws clicking on wooden floors. Daniel had never lived such a strange and tender life. Cinder, the curious one, loved to follow Daniel everywhere. When he chopped herbs, she sat on the table and watched. When he washed his hands, she tried to drink from the bowl. When he read his old books by the fire, she climbed on the pages and made it impossible to turn them. Onyx, the smallest, was shy. She liked to hide in Daniel's coat pocket and only peek out when she felt safe. She made tiny humming sounds when she was happy, almost like a bird. Storm was different, bold, loud. He acted like he owned the cottage. He guarded the door. He growled at Pepper the cat until Pepper finally hissed back and won the fight. Storm respected the cat after that. The three hatchlings ate goat's milk first, then small pieces of soft fish, then bits of rabbit Daniel cooked over the fire. They grew fast. By the end of the 3rd week, each was the size of a small puppy. But there was one thing they all shared. They would not leave Daniel. If he stepped outside to fetch water, all three would press against the window and cry. If he tried to sleep alone, they would climb onto his bed and pile on his chest. If a stranger came to the door, they would dive behind his legs and shake until the stranger left. Daniel was the only safe thing they knew. He understood. He was the first face they had ever seen, the first warm thing they had ever felt. To them, he was not just a man, he was home. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. A boy from the village, Thomas, came to deliver bread. He was 12 years old and had freckles on his nose. He liked Daniel because Daniel always gave him a copper coin and a kind word. That morning, Daniel forgot something he had never forgotten before. He forgot to close the door of the back room. Thomas stepped into the kitchen with the basket of bread. He smiled. He set the basket on the table. Then he heard a sound, a soft chirp, like a baby bird. Thomas turned his head. Cinder had climbed out of the back room. She was sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor, scratching her tiny ear with her back claw, completely unworried. Thomas froze, his mouth opened. The basket fell from his hands. Cinder looked up at him and tilted her head. She chirped again. Thomas did not scream. He did not move. He just stared. Daniel came running from the back room. He saw the boy. He saw the dragon. He saw the future falling apart in front of his eyes. "Thomas," Daniel said softly, "please listen to me." But Thomas was already backing toward the door. His face was pale white. "Mr. Hart," the boy whispered, is that a black one?" Daniel knelt down slowly. "She is just a baby. She has not hurt anyone. She will never hurt anyone." Thomas shook his head fast. "Mr. Hart, my father. He says they bring plague. He says they killed Grandma's village 100 years ago, he says." "Thomas, please sit, have some tea, let me explain." But fear is faster than words. Thomas turned and ran out the door, leaving the bread on the floor. Daniel stood in his kitchen for a long moment. His hands hung at his sides. He knew what would happen next. He had 3 days, maybe 4, before the truth reached the capital. It took 2. On the 3rd evening, just as the sun was setting, Daniel heard them coming. Hooves, many hooves, the clank of armor, the deep voices of men used to giving orders. He looked out his small window. 50 knights filled the road outside his cottage. Their silver armor caught the orange evening light. Their banners showed the royal seal, a golden sword crossed with a dragon's skull. At the front rode a tall man on a black warhorse. His helmet was off. His face was carved from stone. His name was known in every corner of the kingdom. Captain Roland, the kingdom's chief dragon slayer, the man who had killed more dragons than any knight alive. Daniel closed the window slowly. He turned and looked at the 3 hatchlings. They were huddled together in the corner. Storm was puffed up, trying to look big. Cinder was shaking. Onyx had hidden her face under her own wing. They knew, somehow they knew. A heavy fist banged on the door. Daniel Hart, Captain Roland's voice was deep and calm. Open the door, in the name of the king. Daniel walked slowly to the door. He took one deep breath, then he opened it. Captain Roland looked at him. He did not smile, but he did not frown either. Daniel Hart, you are accused of harboring forbidden creatures, he said. I am told there are 3. I am told you found them in the forest. I am told the mother is dead. Daniel said nothing. Roland's voice softened a little. Listen to me, herbalist. I do not want to kill you. You have helped this village for years. My own mother bought herbs from your shop when she had the cough, so I will offer you this one chance. He held up one hand. Step aside. Let my men in. We will take the creatures, end them quickly, and you will walk free. The kingdom will forget your name. Your life will go on. This is more mercy than the law allows. Behind Daniel, in the corner of the cottage, Cinder made a tiny, frightened sound. Daniel heard it, his back straightened. He looked Captain Roland in the eye. No, he said. Roland's face did not change, but his jaw tightened. Then may God have mercy on you, Daniel Hart, because I cannot. He raised one gloved hand. 50 knights began to move. News travels in strange ways. By the time the moon rose that night, every tavern in the kingdom was already buzzing with the story. A herbalist, 3 forbidden dragons, 50 knights at his door. People who had never heard of Hollowbrook now spoke its name. People who had never met Daniel Hart now had strong opinions about whether he should live or die. In the great white palace of the capital, candles burned late into the night. High Magister Albrecht sat at the head of a long wooden table. He was an old man with a long white beard and eyes the color of cold iron. For 60 years he had served the council. For 60 years he had taught the same lesson to every young magister. Black dragons bring death. Black dragons bring sickness. Black dragons must die. Around the table sat 7 other council members. Some looked worried. Some looked angry. None of them looked happy. This is simple, Albrecht said. His voice was dry like old paper. The herbalist must be made an example. If a peasant can defy the law and live, then the law itself dies. We cannot allow it. A younger council member, a woman named Magister Vera, lifted her hand carefully. But High Magister, the man has no army. He has no magic. He is a herbalist. Could we not simply take the creatures and let him be? Albrecht slammed his palm on the table. The candles shook. He has chosen the side of the forbidden ones. He is no longer one of us. He is one of them. Sign the decree. One by one, the council members signed. The youngest signed last, her hand shaking. The royal decree read like this: Daniel Hart, herbalist of Hollowbrook, shall be put to death together with the 3 forbidden creatures he protects. The execution shall happen within 7 days. A messenger rode for Hollowbrook before sunrise. Back at the cottage, the siege had begun. Captain Roland was a careful man. He did not break down doors when he did not need to. He surrounded the cottage with his 50 knights and gave orders. Burn the herb gardens, cut off the well, block every road, let no food enter, let no water enter, make the man come out on his own. For 3 days, nothing happened. Daniel sat inside with the hatchlings. The food was running low. The water bucket was almost empty. The fire was small because he was saving wood. The little ones were scared. They could hear the knights outside. They could hear horses snorting and armor clinking and men laughing around campfires. So Daniel did the only thing he knew how to do. He sang to them. He sang old lullabies his mother had sung to him when he was small. Songs about meadows and rivers and stars. Songs about safe places and warm beds. His voice was not beautiful, but it was kind, and the hatchlings loved it. Onyx fell asleep first, curled up by his neck. Cinder fell asleep next, wrapped around his arm. Storm fought sleep the longest because he wanted to be brave, but in the end even he gave in. And then something strange happened. While Daniel sat by the small fire holding 3 sleeping dragons, he started to shake. Not from cold, from fear. He was a herbalist. He was no hero. He had no idea how this was going to end. A tear rolled down his cheek. Storm woke up first. The little blue dragon looked up at Daniel. He saw the tear. He climbed slowly up Daniel's chest. Then he pressed his warm forehead against Daniel's cheek and breathed a soft puff of warm air on his skin. Cinder woke, she did the same, so did Onyx. 3 little dragons, who could one day burn forests to ash, gently tried to comfort the crying man who had saved them. Daniel laughed and cried at the same time. "You silly things," he whispered. "You silly, beautiful things." Far away in the palace, someone else was awake. Princess Arya stood on her stone balcony, wrapped in a thick cloak. She was 19 years old, with dark hair and serious eyes. She had read the decree that her father had signed. She had heard the gossip in the halls. Something was wrong. She felt it deep in her chest. Arya was not like the other royals. She read books, old books, forbidden books, books that were locked away in the deepest part of the royal archive, books that told a different story about black dragons, a story she had never been allowed to speak out loud. She turned and walked back into her room. From under her bed she pulled out a heavy leather book. She opened it carefully. The pages were yellow and old. She had to ride tonight alone. If she was right, then her father had just signed the death of an innocent man and 3 innocent creatures. If she was right, then everything the kingdom believed for 1,000 years was a lie. She dressed in dark riding clothes. She wrapped the heavy book in cloth. She slipped out of the palace through the servants' gate, walking past a sleepy guard who did not even look up. In the royal stable she chose the fastest horse, a brown mare named Whisper. She rode out into the cold night. Meanwhile, in the camp outside the cottage, a young knight sat by a fire he could not enjoy. His name was Edmund. He was 18 years old. This was his first mission. He had joined the Dragon Slayer Corps because his father had been a knight and his grandfather too. But all night long he had heard something coming from inside the cottage, a man's voice, soft and gentle, singing lullabies. Edmund thought of his own father, who used to sing to him when he was sick. He looked at his sword, he looked at the small cottage, he looked at the stars. For the first time in his short night's life, Edmund began to wonder. Was he on the right side? A soft knock came at the back window of the cottage just before dawn. Daniel almost did not hear it. He was lying on the floor with the 3 hatchlings curled against him, half asleep, half awake, listening to every small sound in case the knights finally came. The knock came again, 3 soft taps, then a pause, then 3 more. Not the sound a knight would make. Daniel slid out from under the warm pile of dragons. Storm grumbled in his sleep. Daniel crept to the back window and pulled aside the wooden shutter just 1 inch. A young woman stood in the dark garden. Her hood was up. Her face was small and pale in the moonlight. "Please," she whispered, "let me in. I am not here to hurt you." Daniel hesitated, but there was something in her eyes, something tired and honest. He unlocked the back door. She slipped inside fast. She carried a heavy bundle wrapped in cloth. When her hood fell back, Daniel almost dropped his lantern. He had seen her face before, on coins, on flags, on the silver mark of the royal seal. "Princess Arya," he whispered. She lifted one finger to her lips. "Please, the knights cannot know I am here." Daniel closed the door quickly. The hatchlings were already awake. They had heard her come in. They stood in a small line in the middle of the room, watching her. Storm stepped forward, blocking the other two. He puffed his little chest. He made a tiny growl. Arya knelt down slowly. She did not reach out. She just sat on her knees and lowered her head like a person greeting a king. "Hello, little ones," she said softly. "I came to help." Storm did not growl again. Onyx peeked out from behind him. Cinder, brave little Cinder, took 3 small steps forward. She sniffed Arya's hand. Then she climbed into the princess's lap and curled up like a kitten. Arya looked up at Daniel with wet eyes. "She trusts me," she whispered. "I have never been trusted by anything in my whole life." Daniel sat down across from her. "Why are you here, Your Highness?" Arya placed the heavy bundle on the floor. She unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a thick leather book, old, cracked, smelling of dust and time. "This book is forbidden," she said. "Only royals are allowed to read it. I stole it from the deepest part of the archive. If my father knew I had it, he would lock me in a tower." She opened the book to a page marked with a red ribbon. "For 1,000 years our kingdom has taught one story. Black dragons brought the Great Plague. Black dragons killed our ancestors, so black dragons must die." She tapped the old page. "It is a lie." Daniel leaned closer. The page was full of careful handwriting and small drawings. "This book was written by Magister Cyril 300 years ago," Arya said. "He was the royal historian. He found the truth and wrote it down. The plague that killed those villages 1,000 years ago did not come from dragons. It came from a poisoned well. A magister at the time, a corrupt one, used the fear to gain power. He blamed the black dragons. He started the killings. He became the most powerful man in the kingdom." She looked up at Daniel. "Cyril tried to tell the council. They burned his other books. They locked this one away. They killed him quietly in his sleep. And the lie became the law for 1,000 years." Daniel sat very still. He looked at the 3 hatchlings. Cinder was now in his lap. Onyx was sleeping. Storm was watching the princess with serious eyes. He felt sick. He felt angry. He felt something he had never felt before, a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. He was not protecting monsters. He was protecting the last innocent victims of the longest lie in his kingdom's history. "Why are you telling me this?" he whispered. "Because I am going to take this book to my father. I am going to read it out loud in front of the whole council. I am going to make them hear the truth. They will not listen." "Some will," Arya said. "I have spent 2 years quietly speaking to younger council members. 6 of them have read parts of this book in secret. 6 of them already believe. If I bring them and the book together at the right moment, the High Magister cannot stop us." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Princess, Captain Roland will break down my door at sundown today. I heard the orders through the wall. I do not have a week. I do not have a day." Arya's face went white. "Then I must ride now." She stood fast. She wrapped the book again. She moved toward the back door. She turned at the last moment. "Daniel Hart, if I do not make it back in time, if I am too late, just know this. You are the bravest man I have ever met. And what you did for these little ones no king in our history has ever done." Daniel could not speak. He only nodded. Arya slipped out into the cold morning. A minute later, hooves drummed away into the distance. Daniel turned and looked at the three hatchlings. He had a few hours, maybe less. He spent them well. He fed the little ones the last of the dried fish. He brushed their small scales with a soft cloth. He told them stories about meadows and stars. He told them about their mother, the brave black dragon in the forest, who had loved them so much she gave them up to save them. When the sun began to fall in the western sky, he stood up. He walked to the kitchen. He picked up the only weapon he owned, a small kitchen knife with a wooden handle. He stood in the doorway. He held the knife in one shaking hand. The three hatchlings huddled behind his legs. Outside, the knights began to mount their horses. Daniel closed his eyes. He whispered one quiet prayer. "Please hurry, princess, please." The sun sat low on the hills like a red eye watching. Captain Roland sat on his black war horse at the front of the line. His helmet was tucked under his arm. His silver hair caught the dying light. He stared at the small cottage and felt something heavy in his chest. He had killed many dragons, big ones, mean ones, dragons that burned villages and ate cattle. He had earned his title with blood. But for 3 days, all he had heard from this cottage was a man singing lullabies. He pushed the thought away. He was a knight. He had his orders. The decree was signed. He raised his hand. Forward! 20 knights walked toward the cottage door, swords drawn. The other 30 stayed back, ready to ride down anyone who tried to escape. The young knight Edmund walked among the first 20. His sword felt heavy in his hand. His mouth was dry. He kept thinking about lullabies and his own father. The first knight reached the door. He raised one boot and kicked. The wood broke. Inside the small cottage, the men stopped. They had expected a screaming man with a weapon, a trap, a spell, anything. They saw a herbalist kneeling on the floor. Daniel was on his knees in the middle of the room. His arms were wide open. The 3 little hatchlings were huddled against his chest, Cinder shaking, Onyx hiding her face, Storm standing in front of them all, growling softly, trying to protect a man who was protecting him. The kitchen knife lay on the floor near Daniel's foot. He had put it down. Daniel looked up at the knights. His voice was soft, steady, tired. "If you kill them, you kill me first," he said. "I will not move. I will not fight, but I will not step aside, so you will have to walk through me." The knights did not move. Some looked at the floor, some looked at each other. Captain Roland pushed past his men. He walked into the cottage with his sword raised. His face was hard. His eyes were colder than any winter. He stood 3 steps from Daniel. "Herbalist," he said, "last chance, step aside." "No," Daniel said. Roland lifted his sword. And then little Onyx, the smallest hatchling, peeked out from behind Daniel's arm. She did not roar. She did not breathe fire. She did not even growl. She just looked at Captain Roland with wide silver eyes. And a single tear rolled down her tiny scaled face. Roland stopped. His sword stayed up in the air. His arm did not move. His mouth opened a little, then closed. He had killed dragons for 20 years. He had heard them scream. He had heard them rage. He had heard them die. He had never in his whole life seen a dragon cry. Behind him, the young knight Edmund saw it too. He saw the tear. He saw the tiny shaking dragon. He saw the herbalist with his arms open, and something inside him broke clean in half. Edmund dropped his sword. It hit the wooden floor with a loud clang. The knight next to him turned, surprised. Then slowly he dropped his sword too. Then another, then 2 more. Steel after steel hit the floor. The sound filled the cottage like falling rain. Roland did not turn. He kept staring at little Onyx, who was now hiding her face again in Daniel's coat. His sword arm shook. His jaw was tight. Then far in the distance came a new sound. Hooves. Many hooves, fast hooves. riding hard from the direction of the capital. A bell began to ring, then a horn, then voices shouting. Roland turned his head. A line of horses thundered down the road. At the front rode Princess Arya, her hood blown back, her dark hair flying. Behind her rode 6 council members in their long blue robes, holding lanterns. Behind them rode a dozen royal guards. And behind the guards, riding hard and angry on a white horse, came High Magister Albrecht himself. Arya pulled up her horse outside the cottage. She jumped down before it had stopped moving. She ran inside, holding the heavy leather book in both arms. She saw the scene: the kneeling man, the shaking dragons, the dropped swords, Captain Roland frozen with his blade in the air. She breathed out one long breath of relief. "Stop," she shouted. "In the name of truth, stop." Albrecht came in behind her, his white beard shaking with rage. "This is treason," he shouted. "Princess, what are you doing here? Roland, finish your duty." But Roland did not move. Arya stepped between Daniel and the High Magister. She lifted the book high. "This book," she said loudly, so every knight and villager outside could hear, "was written 300 years ago by royal historian Magister Cyril. It tells the true history of the plague. The plague did not come from black dragons. It came from a poisoned well in the village of Marrowdale. The dragons were blamed by a corrupt magister to gain power. For 1,000 years, this kingdom has murdered innocent creatures based on a lie." The cottage went silent. "I will read the names," Arya said. "The names of every black dragon family killed by our knights in the last 1,000 years. The book has them all. Every mother, every father, every child." She opened the book. She began to read. Albrecht screamed at her to stop. He tried to grab the book. 2 royal guards stepped in front of him and held him back. Arya kept reading. Name after name, family after family, mother after mother. Outside the cottage, the village had gathered. They stood in silence and listened. Captain Roland slowly lowered his sword. His hand was shaking. He looked down at Daniel, still kneeling on the floor with 3 hatchlings pressed to his chest. Then Captain Roland did something he had not done in 20 years. He sheathed his blade. 3 days later, the great hall of the palace was packed to the back walls. Nobles in fine robes pressed shoulder to shoulder with farmers in patched coats. Merchants stood next to soldiers. Old grandmothers stood next to small children. Word had spread like fire across the kingdom, and people had traveled from every corner just to see what would happen. At the front of the hall, on a tall wooden throne, sat the king. He was a thin man with a tired face and silver hair. Beside him stood Princess Arya, her hands folded but her eyes sharp. In the center of the hall stood Daniel Hart. He wore his old herbalist clothes because he had nothing finer. He had not asked for finer. The 3 hatchlings sat at his feet, calm now, watching the room with curious eyes. High Magister Albrecht stood to one side, in chains. The royal historian, a kind old woman named Magister Helena, stood at a wooden stand reading from the old leather book. She had been reading for 2 days. Names, dates, truths, lies, murders dressed as law. By the end of the 2nd day, the hall had no air left for argument. The king rose from his throne slowly. "For 1,000 years," he said, "our crown has been built on a lie. My grandfather signed orders to kill innocent creatures. His grandfather did the same, and his before him. We were taught that this was justice. It was not. It was murder." He looked at Daniel. "Daniel Hart of Hollowbrook, you stood alone against an army. You stood alone against 1,000 years of fear. You stood alone against me, and you were right. I was wrong." The king stepped down from his throne. He walked across the hall. He stopped in front of Daniel. Then the king of the realm did something no king had ever done in living memory. He bowed, a deep, slow bow, to a herbalist. The hall held its breath. "I cannot give you back what you suffered," the king said, "but I can give you this. From this day forward, the Black Dragon bloodline is no longer forbidden. The killing ends today. The decree is burned. The law is rewritten. And Magister Albrecht will spend the rest of his days in the cold monastery of Northwatch, reading every name he helped erase." The hall erupted. People cheered, people cried. Some people fell to their knees. Daniel did not cheer. He did not cry. He just looked down at the three little dragons at his feet and felt his tired heart finally rest. He bowed his head to the king. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I do not want gold, I do not want a title, I would like to go home, I would like to plant my herbs again." The king smiled. "Then go home, Daniel Hart, and take your family with you." That afternoon, the long road back to Hollowbrook was lined with people. They threw flowers at Daniel's small cart. They reached out to touch the hatchlings. Some women cried. Some children laughed and chased the cart with bare feet. Captain Roland rode beside the cart. He had asked for this duty himself. They rode in silence for a long time. When they reached the edge of Hollowbrook, Roland pulled his horse close. He looked down at Daniel. "I have killed many dragons, herbalist," he said. His voice was rough. "I built my whole life on it. Today, you taught me what I should have learned 20 years ago." He took off his right glove. He placed his bare hand over his heart. Then Captain Roland, the most feared dragon slayer in the kingdom, bowed his silver head to a man in a herbalist's coat. "I am sorry, Daniel Hart, for all of them, for everyone I killed who did not deserve it." Daniel reached up and gently touched the captain's arm. "Then teach the next ones better," he said. Roland nodded. He rode away into the sunset. The cottage looked the same as Daniel had left it. The herb garden was burned, but the soil was still good. The roof had a hole, but holes can be fixed. Pepper the cat came out from under the porch and meowed angrily at Daniel for being gone so long. Daniel sat down on the front step. The sun was setting over the graywood forest. The sky was orange and pink and gold. Cinder climbed into his lap, curious as always. Onyx settled by his shoulder, humming her tiny bird song. Storm sat at his feet, watching the forest like a small soldier. In the months and years that came after, many things changed. Princess Arya became Queen Arya, and her rule became known as the kindest in 1,000 years. She rewrote old laws. She freed creatures that should never have been chained. She visited Daniel's cottage twice a year for tea and quiet talk. Captain Roland left the Dragon Slayer Corps and started a school for young knights. The first lesson he taught was always the same. Look twice, then look again. Fear is a fast teacher and a bad one. The young knight Edmund became Roland's best student. And in the small cottage at the edge of Hollowbrook, 3 black dragons grew up safe and loved. Cinder grew tall and clever. She helped Daniel mix his herbs by carrying small baskets in her teeth. She loved music and would hum along when he sang. Onyx stayed shy but became Daniel's shadow. Wherever he went, she went. She would sit on the roof and watch him work in the garden. Storm grew large. By his 5th year, he was the size of a small house. He slept in a barn Daniel built just for him. The village children, who had once been afraid, now climbed on his back and rode him slowly around the meadow. Storm pretended to be annoyed, but he was secretly proud. One evening, many years later, a small girl from the village came up the path with a single wildflower in her hand. She was no more than 4. She walked right up to Storm, who lowered his huge head down to the grass. She placed the flower in front of him. The huge black dragon, the last of the forbidden bloodline, gently let her pet his snout. Daniel watched from the porch. His hair was gray now, his back was a little bent, but his eyes were bright. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "See, the world was never broken, it just needed someone to listen." The sun went down behind the graywood forest. The cottage glowed warm in the last light. 3 dragons settled in for the night, safe and home. and somewhere in the sky, a black dragoness from long ago could finally rest.